Awesome. All right, so we'll get started on this. So to introduce everyone, this is Alex Laurent.
Hello, everybody.
And here's something a little bit of funny. He's the art director for Art 2. Is that your proper title?
That is my proper title.
It's
improper.
Things move crazy, and you know we're all remote.
I think that's right. Last I checked. Am I still the art
Jesse
director?
is like, not anymore.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, no, okay.
We'll see after this.
He says,
We'll see how this interview goes.
Yeah, right. Well, ask me in an hour. That's kind of the watchword for the day.
What's funny is, although Alex and I have talked extensively, this is my first time meeting him as well. And you've been with the company how long now?
Coming up on a year and a half. Let's just say a year and a half.
Yeah. Awesome. So
time flies, doesn't it?
It really does. When you're having fun, like they say.
Yeah.
Good news is I have been.
Yes, absolutely. I think Zane, this is your first time meeting him as well.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So
Yes.
this is
We've been
everyone's first
together.
time meeting
Yes.
him. We are all here together.
Yes.
So we brought you here just because we think it's really cool. Obviously, we already told the community that we're not just going to be diving into a bunch of ARK 2 information, but we did want to bring you on so the community can get to know you. We can get to know you as well, myself, and so that community can kind of understand what your role in the upcoming project is and some of the things you may have worked on in the past. So my first thing I want to throw at you is that, I think as gamers and even as myself, I think a lot of people, tend to have the understanding or tend to think that people have been in game dev forever. I just think that if you started making games, that's what you've been doing all your life. And so tell us a little bit about your history. Did you start in game dev? Let's start there.
That's a good place to start, and it gives me. I can answer that question really simply, saying no, not really. I think I might be a bit of an anomaly in that grouping, because I came at it in a weird direction, from a weird direction, which is no longer that unique. But when I did get into games, it was kind of unique. But I'll back up. I really came from a place of art and drawing and making pictures first when I was a kid. And just anything sci-fi, monsters, horror, fantasy, anything fantastic, anything even surrealism. If it wasn't out sci-fi, if it was just a little twisted, slightly upside-down version of reality, it was interesting to me. So I loved animation because it always automatically did that. Anything animated was a version of reality through the artist's eyes that was just different from reality. So that just got me from a very young age. And because I was so inspired by movies that I would see back then, and animation and stop motion animation and early special effects that you'd see in all the sci-fi and horror and creature fantasy movies of the day. And this day is a ways back.
Yeah.
You can't see under here, but there's some gray hair under here. Let's just leave it at that. I go back. And so, this is an era before a lot of the things we take for granted now, way back, centuries ago. And so back then, special effects and sci-fi movies looked a whole lot different, obviously, than they do today. And there was much less of an industry to go into. But I was obsessed with it, and from a pretty early age decided I wanted to go into it.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
What did you already know what steps you have to take to make that a reality?
There's the rub, because there was no pathway. Today, arguably, there's much more of a pathway to get into doing game development, visual effects, production design, working in the film or entertainment industry. There's a lot more options, so many more. Back then, again, it was this kind of unknown secret thing that
So few companies were even doing it.
relative to today, yeah. I mean, there were obviously in Hollywood, you had for films, that's where the stuff happened, but it was all very secretive. So the term movie magic really felt like it, because it was truly secrets kept by, close.
Tradecraft. Once someone else knows how to do it, they can reproduce it.
That's exactly right.
Your lasers are no longer unique.
That's it. That feels like a quote from something. Your lasers are no longer unique. That just feels like it should be a quote. All right, make it a quote. No, you're absolutely right. Tradecraft and sort of trade secrets was taken in a different way then. So there was no pathway that I knew of to get into being a special effects artist. But I took kind of a winding road to get there. And that road took me through games, or introduced me to the idea of interactive games, interactive anything. And it was, again, a very different size and shape of what we meant by games back then. But I found my way through my art and drawing, and I went to art school in all traditional, before computers and digital art became the thing, it was just about to break. And I ended up I got hired by a company that was doing what was called multimedia back then. CD-ROM authored discs, multimedia. And that's a real quaint old dinosaur term, different kind of dinosaur. And basically it was when animation and computer graphics tools started to be available on the equivalent of basically desktop computers. Computers that were outside of university labs, that were affordable, that didn't take up, they weren't refrigerator sized, rooms full of mainframes all connected, and that's what you do to create one simple chrome ball or animated skeleton. It was starting to get make much more available to a lot more people. So you had some small early studios sort of out on the cutting edge of this new medium using the early Apple computers. So that was my first exposure to digital art, was the earliest version of Photoshop, the earliest version of 3D modeling tools, something vaguely resembling a video editing tool.
And they've come a long way.
Yeah. Yeah, they have. For
Those
sure.
you did everything.
Yes.
You didn't, there was no button for start this process or get to here. Like, everything was, you had to do everything.
So much more. Although it was the Mac. And so, yeah.
Collar. Keeps,
Flip
I think
collar
it's hitting the mic.
away from Mike. Thank you.
There we go.
Room from the tech room over there. Like keeping me on the straight and narrow. Okay.
Gotta love
Thank
live
you.
productions, man.
Yes. We've got about 6 people in there, all in these banks.
And they're all like, no, stop.
Every one of them is sudden. And I
Cut
just
it.
have been oblivious. I've been so wrapped up. Thank you, everybody. Where was I?
You're working on the first Apple.
The early Apples, yeah. And so because it was an Apple computer, even though it was so simple, they did pay a lot of attention to making the whole graphical user interface and the way you approached the software much more user-friendly than if you were literally entering lines of code to do a simple thing. So and I've never been someone to
start
to do
program now.
That's right.
With these parameters.
That's right.
And you don't know that process, you can't even open it.
That's it. We used a thing called Macromedia Director, which was a simple sprite-based 2D animation program with interactivity and with a language called Lingo. The only time I've dipped into anything code-related was Lingo to write these simple interactive, I push a button here, it's going to take you over here and make that happen. I was very excited and proud when I was able to do that.
I bet.
But that sort of grew into Flash. Of course, that was the foundation for Flash, and then the rest is history, as far as Flash goes, anyway. But it was really cool to be looking back at it, especially to be at the forefront of something which was emerging. And we were so excited about these tools, which were so new to us. And who would have known that this many years later, they've not only evolved, they've just evolved. Everything's evolved around the whole world of digital content is just so much different. But it's evolved so much more.
It has.
It's very exciting. So I feel a little bit of like I have a kind of a cool perspective on having lived through those milestones of seeing things as they were just kind of exploding in that way. But to come back to your question, that was my early exposure to games, and it was really sort of interactive stuff. And so that company and the companies I worked for in that multimedia area industry, so it was called, were everything from corporate kind of training tools, which would have simple point and click kind of commands to take you through things, simple interfaces to play QuickTime movies. We had QuickTime movies back then. And then that evolved into sort of education and entertainment, which they called edutainment. Because people were starting to have computers in their homes by that time. This is mid to late 90s. And so you'd have people who could afford it with a PC in their home or a Macintosh computer in their home. And so these were education tools for their kids to point and click and learn ABCs and math and history and whatever else. So doing early education products started to bring in some visual imagination and simple animation and interaction, and that's where I really kind of got excited by it. So it was during that time that I learned about not only digital tools, but also how production works. Because I'd studied illustration before and graphic design, and those are very solitary things. I'd worked alone before that.
How do you bring it all in with the whole project?
I had to understand how a whole thing gets made and realize it can't all be about me. It's got to be about a team. And so that's where I learned kind of early art direction skills, how to be a creative manager and leader and work with other people on a larger thing than just what's in my own head.
Awesome. Now, I know some people may or may not, I know people on the team know that you have a background in film. Are there skills that easily transferred over to what you do now? So let's say skills from, what you did in film, and then let's contrast that to what you do now for art too. Are there skills that you take from that film world and transfer them over to the game world? How does that work in your head? And, just kind of thinking about that process for you.
No, it's a great question. Deep topic, because back then, again, the idea of coming from the film world and crossing over into games was relatively rare. And it hadn't become a thing. And during the time in the mid-2000s, it started to be a bit more of a thing, funded and sort of driven by some larger companies like EA. They're the ones who hired me over from film. I went to their London studio to work on a Harry Potter game. This London studio of EA did all the Harry Potter console games.
Was that your first position outside of film?
Yeah.
Okay, gotcha.
That was the opportunity that got me to leave my dream job at ILM. And it was, 8 years in a dream job there, doing visual effects for film. Longer story for another time, how I got to that and what that was like. But your question about transferable skills and what it was like to sort of migrate across into another world, it was something. And I learned a lot then. And I learned, I think it worked for me because I learned quickly to have a humility about about the new world I was in. Film is not games. Games are not film. There's a lot of places where they intersect, to answer your question. A whole lot. But there are so many places where they are unique and different. And you have to go in respecting and understanding that and not feeling like, you've got a superiority thing, where I'm coming from the world of movies, where we polish everything to this high luster, and coming into the world of real time, where the Bix is different. Polish means different things, or it did then. Now they're getting more and more inseparable, truly. Yeah. So, but back then, you had to accept differences and understand where to put your emphasis and what mattered, because you couldn't have everything on the PS2. That's what it was, the explosion of the all-powerful PlayStation 2. And, everyone was learning back then even more than we're still learning now, but it was more of a frontier kind of thing in terms of learning how to really push graphics and quality. One of the reasons why I wanted to give this thing a try and why I made this big leap was because the graphics were fidelity and the quality of not only the visuals but the audio were all making a big evolution. We were jumping up a whole level. And so some of my peers had started to make this jump also. EA had also hired them to cross over. And so I looked at them going, well, that's kind of interesting. It's a brand new career path and a real challenge. And so I decided to take the leap, and my family took the leap with me, and we all went over to London for 2 years to take this giant leap. And in terms of skills, I think there are things about the way the visual development process works, understanding the needs of the story, understanding the needs of the gameplay gets added to it, but coming from film, there are design and production processes that carry over really well. And yet very quickly you realize there's a difference. So I had to play an enormous amount of games to really immerse myself and understand what the experience was like. And it sounds really simple to say this now, but back then it was a big light bulb. But I was so used to the passive medium of film, where everything is about what's been pre-authored for you. You're sitting there just taking it in. What I learned as I played was that the simple act of interacting with it, the simple act of controlling your character in the environment, that you can look around anywhere you want, that you can go from here to there and do things, changes your entire critical lens. And so the visuals being perfectly photorealistic or high polish in every place mattered less. It only mattered in certain areas. Other areas, that was not the point. The point was the interaction. And so my visual critic, my art critic basically, was able to kind of step back a bit and see the art quality of the day in that larger context.
Yeah,
it's really about the whole thing.
For sure. And it brings up an interesting thing. It kind of rolls right into it. In terms of ARK 2, can you talk about the components of an ARK team? or of an art team.
Oh,
So
yeah,
a lot of players don't necessarily understand the different branches or the different teams you may have within an art team. So kind of explain how that breaks out for you.
Sure thing. And that's actually one of the areas where you've got a lot of similarities between the film world, linear, pre-rendered entertainment, whether it's film or television or animation, and game production. Is you have some of these same buckets and processes, and those buckets are discipline-based. So you've got the big art umbrella, which we call art or content creation in games, and on ARK 2 and here at Studio Wildcard are broken into kind of these familiar groupings, which are creatures and characters. That's a unique set of skills: organic modeling, clothing and costumes, armor, props that are worn, all of the subtleties and nuances of sculpting creatures, characters, dinos, all the things we love in ARK, that's from that team. And then you've got animation. Animation is its own discipline, its own vertical within our studio. We have a creature character lead, Catherine. We've got an animation lead, Amy. And so they are specialists. They're leaders in their discipline area, and they manage the team of animators or creature sculptors or modelers, etc. Then you've got environment. So I'm going down sort of the obvious. Big buckets,
this is good to know. This is very good information to put out there for sure.
You've got environment, and that environment. See, a lot of these aren't like siloed columns of disciplines. There's a lot of overlap, and they touch each other, and they kind of go back and forth. All the disciplines are talking to each other all the time, because that's just the way it works. It's necessary, and it's also one of the beautiful things about a size of company like we are. We're all sort of in one place working on the same thing, so we talk to each other a lot. And so when we talk about character artists and people responsible for characters and creatures, they're talking to the animation team all the time. And they're talking to the technical art team. Technical art is another kind of umbrella to art as well. So we were talking about environment. Environment bleeds over into level design. So that means that the level design is so high level, it's literally the map of the game the area you're going to release, and everything that's going to go in it. That then translates into where trees are going to grow, what areas are more arid in our world, in ARK world, what areas are more damp and by bodies of water, therefore how does that affect flora and fauna? Where are our dinos going to migrate? What are all those kinds of decisions? The environment artist is thinking about all that. And that translates down to the work that the artists on the team who are charged with making trees and plants and rocks. I mean, everyone's in this conversation together from very high level to super granular.
And to pull it back, how does that all tie back into you? To give the users context on what your role is in that whole kind of hierarchy.
So the direction of all of these, the art director, my title is, I'm responsible for pulling all of these things together with the same unified artistic style and aesthetic kind of vision, and keeping it all within the world of ARK, the world of our brand, and keep making sure that all of the design decisions that we make visually are reinforcing and supporting our story, that they're flowing nicely from all the prior chapters of ARK while leading us into the future. And I work in close tandem with the technical art director, Lawrence, and the technical art team, because they and everyone else I've been mentioning are all responsible for making that vision real. So, I'm having lots of conversations with Jesse, for example, on the creative vision and the story and the mood of ARK 2. And that my job is in many cases to kind of carry that message into the production trenches on a day-to-day basis, and always have it in the back of my mind, this overarching style vision. And then when it comes to decisions about someone's shield or their armor that they're wearing, sometimes these questions come up again. That issue becomes relevant to something as specific as a piece of a costume or a prop. How these things are made in our world, how an object that might be used or worn by a player, that ties into a backstory. And there's a logic that our world, there's a term, world building, which designers of media often use. It's kind of an overused term, world building, but I take it pretty literally.
Yeah.
It's a good term to describe what we're doing. Literally, we're building a world. And so the world has its rules. There's a logic, and we need to stay consistent with that.
Yeah.
That's one of my jobs, is to make sure there's a consistency to everything, so nothing stands out too weird.
Excuse me. giving life to the world.
Yeah. That's right.
Okay, gotcha.
Got it.
I did want to, that brings up another point that I think that just threw me off of my train
Food.
of thought.
I know the whole idea of food
is
throws me off all the
yeah,
time.
as soon as I saw food, I'm like, what?
What are we talking about? Who are you? Who?
No,
what am I?
yeah, seriously, who is this again?
I'm hungry.
It's good. No, it's good you shared that because not only does it give players insight on how the soup is made, it gives me insight. I mean, some of that is even clarifying for me, of how things happen, because a lot of people don't know. Like, yes, ARK is a small team, but a lot of times you're only focused on what's going on in your world.
Sure.
You're not always going to know what's going on in the art team and what the creatures or the artists are working on. So a lot of times when I hear this stuff, it's very revelational for me as well. Because it's the first time I'm hearing a lot of this. But it did bring me back to what I was thinking. So when you first heard about ARK or approached the project, I believe you and Jesse worked together in the past. Is that you and Jesse worked together. When you started hearing about ARK, was there anything about it that really made you say, like, I want to work on that project? Or is there something I want to do with that project?
Oh, yeah. Well, dinosaurs.
Yeah, there we go.
Dinosaurs
I was
plus,
waiting to hear that.
Plus sci-fi, plus open world, and the fact that you can just basically wander in this world and just build stuff and exist and survive and thrive and go your own path. I really love that kind of gameplay and that combination. And also there's a spirit of fun about the fiction of ARK world that I also really like.
Yeah.
We take ourselves seriously, and yet we also are all about kind of not taking ourselves too seriously. There's tongue-in-cheek, and there's a sense of fun about the whole thing woven throughout. And somehow those two things coexist. That's not really easy to make kind of a sense of humor and a very deep, seriously developed story world and visual world with so much texture and features and richness in it that you can uncover. To make those two things kind of coexist, where you're both taking yourself seriously while also a little bit making fun of yourself in the same breath, that's hard.
It's a fine line to walk.
It's a very fine line to walk, and you can fall off that very quickly if you don't get the balance right. And one of my first impressions with it was that ARK gets that balance right, and the fans and the community recognize it. That brings in another interesting thing, which has been a big light bulb for me since working on ARK, is how to art direct a game that has so much important input from the community.
Yeah.
It's like a collaboration instead of art direction is one of many ways that we author. We're authors of the product.
Right, for
we're
sure.
all makers of this product. And so you take that responsibility on. And again, in film, where it's linear, all the people making that movie are delivering this completely sealed, done, finished experience to the audience. You go to see it wherever you're seeing it. It's done. You're going to take it in. You'll think what you will of it. Big screen, small screen, whatever. All you can really do at that point is stop, start, rewind. That's it. You can scrub forward and backward. There's not a lot else you can do to go into it and interact it and change, let alone co-author it, let alone customize it.
Yeah.
Of course, games have completely, they're the place where all that can happen, and it's obvious why that's so appealing. So this is my first time working on a game that has so much community input and where customization is so much a thing. So it's been fascinating to me and fun, challenging at times. I'm still learning it to figure out what that line is between our authored version of ARK World and all the cool goodness that the community is going to bring. How do you leave room for people to put their creative mark on it and have fun, which is one of the things our community loves.
Yes.
Never want to take that away. And yet we also want to give them a sort of starter baseline authored version of the experience, which is awesome.
It's common, like, how do you have vision but still empower people to be creative?
That's it.
Because you still want to have your own vision as an art director and as all the people that are working on this project.
Yes.
Obviously, you have your own vision, but you want to empower people to be able to be creative within that vision and envision themselves how they like to, see themselves within your creation.
Exactly.
So
That's
I do
right.
see that balance of that, and that's interesting that you brought that up because I can see that being a challenge, for sure, of how does that weigh out on the balance scale, and which things do you draw the Which things do you draw the line on? Which things do you kind of let the community say, we should probably just, so that's very interesting to hear that tango. He's ordering food right now, just to let you guys know.
I am.
And he should be, and I'm going to order next.
Yeah.
So
we'll just
I'm going
distract
for the
him for a
chicken.
moment.
I'm going, yeah.
I'm stealing all the questions. I'm like,
You are stealing all the questions, but that's okay.
I gotta choose toppings now. Oh my God,
let
this
him,
is hard.
don't talk to him like shooting food.
I need complete silence for this.
Yeah, absolutely.
No, I'm kidding. Keep talking.
And it gives me a little bit of time to think about a good question too that's fitting. I would say for you, whenever you're starting a project and really trying to get a understanding of what the vision is that you're shooting for, how do you, because it's so complex, like when you're talking about like an entire movie or an entire game, like getting the vision for that and the feeling and the tone and understanding that in a way that, you can confirm that you're going in the right direction with whoever is authoring or directing it all, but also to make sure that, the end product or as you're producing everything, there's as minimal bumps as possible.
Yes.
Like misunderstandings and making sure that you're in tune with the vision that's desired. How do you do that?
Well, that's a big question. In film, when I was in the film industry, I was a visual effects art director. So I was the art director for shockingly, the visual effects part. And I was at ILM for the longest period of that chapter of my career. And in that situation, you're working with the people at ILM who are you're one of the leadership team working under the effects supervisor. And all of us are working for the film studio. And basically our job is to tell the director's story and tell it really, really well. And where there's an opportunity to bring our ideas to how these shots or these sequences or these creatures could be their best, could be the coolest version and the best version for that film. So we're working from a script sometimes, from nothing more than words on a page. And as a visual effects art director, I'm working in partnership and also serving the larger vision of that movie's production designer. Now, a production designer works with the director and the core production. Visual effects studios are part of post-production, in theory, the way we're used to thinking about it. Even though now visual effects are so much a part of every movie that they're much more involved early on, traditionally visual effects are added later, so they're brought in later. And the sets and the overall look of the film has been pretty much decided early. Then our job is to learn that, to know how to extend that world.
You're more or less filling in the details that just are slightly missing.
That's right. Anything that they're not going to build in real life that they're going to add later because it's too big, too fantastic, too expensive, whatever the reasons why they're
Dragons
visual
don't
effects.
actually exist.
Dragons don't actually exist. That's a reason, a good one, a common one. Aliens, dragons, spaceships. Unfortunately,
We don't want to actually eviscerate a person.
No, exactly. That too. All those are good reasons. So those are among the many reasons why we use visual effects. So for any of that stuff that we're doing, we need to again keep it in the world. But the world and the script and the story have already been established. So we have lots of places to go to ask, is this consistent? Is this right for this story, for this film, for your vision, Mr. or Mrs. Director? When in games, there's a version of that, but it's more organic. It doesn't have quite the same set legacy of or form or model necessarily as there are many more versions of that model in video game development. Depending on how story-driven the game is, that also changes things. So I came in not having a set script because it hadn't really been written yet, nor do we really write a linear script for ARK anyway. Yeah. So I had, the simple answer to your question is I talked to everybody and just wringed everybody's brains for as much knowledge as I could. I played the game, I read the forums, I just immersed myself. And that's where I learned just how deep the world goes. It's deep. So much more than I originally would have thought looking at a trailer. So,
yeah.
And that had to include, and rightfully include, talking to our writer. So, Peter, and it was early days for him too. So as he's developing, and as the creative direction from Jeremy and Jesse is all sort of starting to gel for ARK 2 and coming into its own now and take shape, this is where we're always keeping in touch. So this is where any development, it's not just art. game design, we're all talking to each other. And if we're not talking to each other frequently and staying in sync, then we're not doing our jobs right, because we're building this whole thing together. Gameplay, world building, visuals, story, music and audio. It's all kind of coming up together.
Yeah. And it always has to work in tandem. Like,
that's right.
You know, you have something that is too loud. Like, there's only a certain distance that sound will effectually carry in the game. Like, there's a range to where you don't want to go over this, or like you start having weird problems that you didn't expect. So like, only you want to go like 30,000, you know, feet or inches away or centimeters from something, or, you know. Yeah. And just making a creature too big could start running into problems.
Scale.
With that. And you're like, I can't even hear it from over here.
Yeah, for sure. Scale is always a challenge.
Scale of sound, though. I've never even thought about that. That's exactly what, you know, Gareth is going to, you know, that's, you know, and our audio team, that's the thing they think about. And our gameplay program is dealing with audio, and that's stuff that, honestly, it's not something day to day I even would have thought of. And now that you mentioned it, yeah, of course.
Or just the scale of the explosion, like how big something goes. Like, you get surrounded by explosions, and that creates all new problems.
That's right.
Of what to solve.
Yep.
Is there anything you miss from the film world? You know, when you go back to your days of working in the film, is there anything you miss now that you transitioned over to gaming and doing game development?
For a while, I probably would have had some answers. I would have started saying, yeah, a few things. Now I've got to say the state of the art in real time and in games and it has changed so much, has evolved, that honestly the things that I would have said, oh yeah, I miss fidelity, detail in creatures and creature animation. I miss some aspects of hyper photorealism. Nope, I've got all that here. And if you look at the ARK 2 trailer, that sets a tone. Not going to say much about ARK 2, but I will say that the trailer, we very consciously and deliberately set a bar for ourselves that is more cinematic in its visual quality. And so that is, I'm as happy as I could be working with that as a target, as a goal, and bringing that to real time. And the fact that we now have new generations of tools allowing us to really evolve the visual quality bar for ARK overall. I couldn't be more excited to have joined when I did at this time where we're about to kind of soar in terms of the visual fidelity. Take all the goodness of ARK from before and just like boost it. It's super exciting.
That new Unreal is just...
the new Unreal. It's crazy.
Unreal.
It's unreal. I see what you did.
The things that I've been seeing, at least so far, are just, man, you're absolutely right. It's just taking it and pushing it to the next level.
Yeah. Well, its hardware just continues to get
that too.
Well, it's hardware, but a lot of that is team immersion too. I think our team is starting to nail it. 100%. We're getting the right people in the right places, and they're all starting to work. It's just, I think our team is really hit that, hit that stride,
But what you can get away with, and like how much more you can show. With new tech is just
for sure. No, I think tech will allow, a lot of gamers to have higher fidelity experiences, in the future. And not just with ARK, but with other games in general. I think it's a good time to be a gamer. It's a good time to be a dev, to be honest. I think on both sides, it's a lot happening. In the tech world, and a lot to be excited for.
It's true.
Yeah, no, it's awesome.
And games as an industry is super healthy now, so that's another sort of state of the world of our world that's also going on. Just the games economy is humming.
That is true.
Overdrive.
That is true.
Well, and it's one of those few industries that you can just work from anywhere.
Like, that is also true.
It's not seamless, but it's pretty easy to work remote.
That's a reality too. That is a new reality.
Enabled us to be able to still keep doing what we're doing now.
That's right.
I mean, it's
very little bumps.
It's amazing. And then in contrast to the film world during this time, it's definitely different. There, like you were saying, it's definitely definitely
different.
A whole
crew just to film a few minutes.
Oh yeah. Yeah, it's very hard to make films during COVID and maintain safety. Yeah. Not to mention location access to talent from global talent that you might have otherwise. It's suddenly, there are constraints, slowdowns for everything. Part of that is why we're seeing, we talk about supply chain slowdowns in every other sector. In the film world, we're seeing movies open now that were scheduled originally to open a year or two ago. Dune being one of them. Yeah. And I can name a handful of others too that finally we're getting to see them. And we feel like we've been hearing about them for a long time. But actually, they're just sort of sitting in limbo, polishing a little bit. You know,
a little tweak here,
little
tweak there.
Exactly.
Yep.
Schedules have been rearranged a lot, but it's nice to see we're actually starting to see some of those films. I might be wrong, but I don't know that games have suffered from similar delays in production because of COVID.
Yeah, no, I don't know that. Not because of the same reasons.
No,
you know,
no.
they have their own challenges, like Zane was saying. You know, kind of transitioning into remote after you have not been remote was a little bit of a challenge for sure.
Yeah.
But once you get there and you get the teams in place and you start to develop that kind of process, it's definitely possible. I mean, it's
all data.
Yeah. Gen 2 was remote. You know, we did that remote, most of it, I'm pretty sure.
Much entirely.
Yeah.
We did like a few meetings to build the design of it and
early on.
The process, and then it was just remote.
I think that's before I came on, and then when I was in, Gen 2 was in full swing.
Yep.
While the ARK 2 trailer was happening, I was heavily involved in that. I came in to work on that. Immersed myself in ARK 2 world, but Gen 2 was heavy in. And then I joined in to work on the cinematic for Gen 2. And that was super fun.
Oh, man.
And then everyone.
I love that.
Beautiful, too.
Yeah, it was, everyone loved it.
Props to the team on that. That was super fun to.
I always love our, you know, it's, if you're external, and I know everyone external loves those cinematics as well, but if you knew the work that went into those, people are like, oh my, and the amount of people, like, it's a team effort. I'm going to tell you that. It is a team effort, all hands on deck. When you watch those, you know, cinematics, just know that it was everyone's love going into that.
Very true. Very true.
It's I never, you know, being outside of the industry, I never would have thought that it was, you know, that much work went into that little cut scene. There was a 30-second cut scene.
Right.
You know, it's probably a week
It was
worth
a little
of
more
work.
than that.
No, it was. I'm just saying
As an
in
example,
general.
yeah.
I mean, even
every second on screen of that stuff is
it's crazy to see how that expands out.
It's true. And you talk about people coming over from film. I was talking about it from back in the day when I first crossed over and it was still new. Well, since then, it's not so new anymore. And we actually have a handful of folks on our team who also come from film and animation and visual effects and lots of different things. So that's part of our company's DNA in the mix too. And when you're making those cinematics, you're sort of dusting off your old, you know, filmmaking chops in terms of how the storytelling style and blending it with the interactive.
Yes.
And having very interesting conversations that bring in both. So it's really fun for those of us that did dabble or have a whole chapter in linear filmmaking storytelling to be able to kind of dip back into that.
Yeah, and just
those are really
add
fun.
influences of that world back into
re-tap into that
doing.
strength.
Yeah, no, for
That
sure.
skill.
Awesome. Is there anything else you can think of? I don't want to keep you up here forever, mainly because I want to get this food order in.
Good reason.
Anything you could think of saying that I'm missing? And then we obviously can't share too much about ARK 2.
Oh God! Now you open me up to the floodgates of questions I shouldn't ask.
I guess
or
to
can't
ask people. I guess we'll close on what are you looking most forward to in ARK 2 out of the things that you've been working on in a general, very general way of saying things.
Let's see, I have to be careful how I answer that, but I do have an answer. Well, I already talked about the general visual fidelity of everything, just the visual quality of our characters, of our environments, of our dinos, of things that the dinos might have with them.
Yeah, there we go.
The dinos that involve dinos. There's a lot of layers of complexity that we're going to be able to pull off at a new level.
Yeah.
And that players are going to enjoy playing with. Dancing around the words.
That sounds good.
Playing with that are really exciting to me. I'm having a blast working on dinos, for example, and characters that are, to your earlier question, they're film level. We've got some artists on our team. Our artists are film quality folks, and that might.
I get what you're saying.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
That revealed a little legacy kind of bias about the perception of film people, filmmakers, and film people from the film industry about games and how those things are used to be perceived as there's a quality difference came. That is no longer the case.
Yeah.
So now we've got the same quality bar of detail and lifelike, just quality all around, whether it's the animation or the leaves, the way they behave and reflect light on a tree, or the vastness of an environment, a landscape you can look out across and see the sun coming through the clouds. All those details that make up a rich world, we got all that now. And so that quality bar that we associate with movies, we're bringing right into people's homes for this. And so that is the best answer I could give.
No,
you.
and
What
that's
is
a good
exciting
one.
me.
And I think that gives at least the ARK players something to look forward to.
I
They
hope
can
so.
let their imaginations run on reading into what you mean. when you
Yes,
say
that's
things.
part of the fun of it. Part of the
That's
fun of
part of the fun of
anticipation.
it. Yeah. So
It's almost scary how close they can get to what we were talking about
Yeah.
without talking about it, but
Yes,
they pick up on.
Just, right up, you
they-
nudge
like,
right
they're
up
like,
next to it.
I think he might have been talking like.
Maybe.
It's
Maybe I
almost-
was. Maybe
Yeah,
I wasn't.
maybe.
I don't know.
yeah.
We won't say,
No.
but it's kind of
Jesse's
impressive.
right over. No, I'm good, Jesse. I'm good.
It's impressive to watch like people breaking it down and like adding in everything they've heard.
Yeah.
And this little
The theory
context.
crafting. Yeah.
And like how close they can get to
Yes.
sometimes. And it's
Yes.
like we haven't said any. Wow.
Yeah.
It's a
You're
tough
good.
it's a tough line for us to walk because we're proud and excited, and there's something in just like deep in us that wants to just like crow
for
about
sure,
it.
for
We want to
sure.
share. We want to
Yeah.
overshare because we're so excited, but we can't.
Yeah.
So that's where
Gotta hold
draw
it
that
back.
line. Hold that line.
Yep. Awesome. Well, we'll let you get back here. We can put this food order in. Again,
Yes.
this was Alex Laurent. You'll hear more from him in the future as we
Oh, yeah.
move forward towards the ARK 2 and other things that we're working on. But glad you at least got to meet him now, because you'll definitely be seeing his work and things that he's had his influence on, and you'll definitely be seeing those things in the future.
Awesome.
I'm talking to him more in the future.
Fantastic. It was so nice to be
Thanks for
here
stopping
and represent
by.
the art team, the awesome
Yeah,
art team, the art and content
absolutely.
team, and it was a pleasure.
Absolutely.
talking
Can you
to
take
guys
this
both.
phone back to
I
whoever?
will
that's
take the
mine.
phone back.
Oh, that's your phone.
Oh,
Your order.
Can I take the phone anyway? Oh,
Yeah.
you want it back.
Oh,
You want your? Oh, okay.
Did you hit send?
No,
Or
I
the
didn't
add?
hit send. I just added my
Yeah.
thing to it.
Then we're good.
No, I didn't send the order in though. I just
Well, that
added